Do you ever wonder what it would be like if the Nazis had won World War II and then we had the opportunity to view that world through the lens of Philip K. Dick? The Man in the High Castle. We have the only here. Hold on. That's a little bit of a flex. I think it's a book club edition, although it doesn't really say book club edition. Okay, Dick, all right. No, maybe it's not. I like the little old ones. The only novel that Dick ever wrote that won the Hugo Award. Now, first things first, this book is very, very Dick. I wouldn't say that this is his best work. Absolutely not. I wouldn't say that this is my favorite of his books. Absolutely not. But what I will say is I absolutely, having read it, I absolutely understand why out of all 40-something books that he wrote, this is the one that took home the Hugo. I get that. Now, how does that work? It's a little bit more subtle and a little bit more nuanced. It's a little bit more subdued than his other books. His other ones have a tendency to be really bombastic. Think Ubik or the Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch. They can go off the rails. And so far off the rails, which in my mind makes them so much better reads, at least on the entertainment front. But it makes them less accessible to the popular, massive mainstream of people, to the point where I can see why the Hugos would be like, what's the best thing, this year, and overlook some of his other works. Well, like I said, this one's just a little bit more subdued in what it's trying to do, but at the same time, some that might actually make it a little bit more effective in what it's examining in this particular book, I should say. Anyway, having said all that, this is essentially an alternate history book. The Nazis won World War II. We are now living in the 1960s. The Nazis have taken control of the Eastern. Nazis now have control of all Eastern United States, and Japan controls the West Coast with a small strip of still free air, basically a free zone in the Rocky Mountains. So it's very Pacific Coast heavy. I'm thinking the Nazis won the war. And I keep saying the Nazis won the war. I should say the Axis powers won the war, because I'm thinking Nazis won the war. Nazis control the East Coast, New York City, all of that stuff. And we don't touch it. We just don't even think about it. We don't talk about it. It basically isn't even there. But it's very heavy focus on the West Coast, very heavy focus on the Oriental aspects of the book. Less so on Germany, less so on Nazis. They are there. They do discuss them, but they're not as. The focus is, like I said, much more heavy on the Oriental front. Also, very heavy focus on racism and the Oriental racism towards the white people, the Germans' racism towards, well, everyone, but mainly the Orientals, even though they were allies in World War II. They won World War II, they split the United States, but already there's tension between the victors. There's just a pretty heavy focus on racial tension, I should say. Now, the cast of characters, holy crap, there's a wonderful cast of characters in this one, large cast of characters, lots of them. You have a high-ranking Japanese man, a shop owner that sells little trinkets and antiquities, basically a small, low-level tradesman who's also Jewish, his ex-wife, a Nazi agent almost, German Nazi agent, basically. I think that's about it. And they're written in a very Dick style. This is another thing where I'm like, this is a very Philip K. Dick book. In that they are the characterizations and the character work is very, very quick and very internal. By that, I mean that we quickly bounce from character to character, and internal as in their internal thoughts are pressed right to the forefront of the narrative. Which is very, like I said, very typical of Dick. That's how he tends to write his characters. And by the way they think and their thought processes are right in the front center of the narrative of what's happening. So from the anxieties and the inadequacies of the Americans versus the Japanese, because the Japanese are above them, and the inadequacy that certain characters feel even being around Japanese people from the American perspective, or to the prejudices of the German agent, like the Nazi, that are right front center in his mind, which can be a little off-putting when you first get to that character. You're like, oh my. But it works, and it works exceptionally well. I would say that as far as his style is concerned, it's very much in his style, but it's also some of his most effective character work. So then inside this book, we have an alternate history of World War II. You know, Nazis win World War II. Now, in this alternate history, there is a book called The Grasshopper Lies Heavy. And most characters in this book have either read the book or in the process of reading the book or are quite invested in, obsessed with, in some cases, this book called The Grasshopper Lies Heavy. And in this book, there's an alternate reality of what if the Allied powers won World War II. So we're reading an alternate history book of what if the Nazis won, while they, in their world, they're reading an alternate history book of what if we won. So you think, okay, well, that book, The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, will then mirror our own world, and they will have a view into our world as we have a view into theirs. No. He then creates a completely different reality of what would it look like if the Allies won, but it looks absolutely nothing like our world. Nothing at all. So it's like an alternate reality within an alternate reality, but it in no way, shape, or form resembles the world that we actually live in, the world where the Allies actually won. So, which is just a fascinating approach. And then they contemplate on it, which makes you contemplate on it. It's very good. It's very good. It's wonderful. There's also in this book a very, very heavy emphasis on Japanese, Chinese, Oriental influence in general by Buddhism, the I Ching, the idea and concept of yin and yang, the concept of Wu, and just Oriental philosophy in general, which makes it a little bit more meditative on certain aspects of things than maybe some other Philip K. Dick books that you've read. Although I feel like most of his books are meditative on some level, on something, whether it be religion or philosophy or reality. He's always diving deep into something. But this one, once again, less kind of bombastic, a little bit less break you in half as you're doing it. And it's more, instead of meditating on the nature of reality and what is consciousness and what makes somebody human, it's more just on a spiritual level. Like something as simple as there's a strong contemplation at some point on, does an object have an innate energy built into it, or does it acquire it through antiquity with age? Does it slowly grow over time, or is it possible for something to be developed, created by an artisan? And can energy be imbued directly into an object through the hands of the artisan who made it, just by sheer force of creative will as they manufacture the object? And then, if you are able to imbue an object with energy, can that energy then have transformative effect on the person who ends up purchasing it or owning it through introspective reflection on the object and the energy therein? I think I pulled that off. That's just one of the types of ponderances that you're going to get in this book. There are a couple, definitely not the only one, but that's the kind of thing that he's going to think about, and he wants you to think about too. At least he's going to try and get you there. But I also think that's the kind of thing, because that's the kind of stuff that he does in general across the board, but I think just the way that it's done in this one, I think that's also the reason, or a big reason, why this one got the Hugo. I really do. And I don't want to go too much more in depth about it. If I've intrigued you in any way, shape, or form about this book, that's great. Go pick it up and read it. I didn't talk about plot or characters or what's going on because I'm just trying to tease and tantallate and get your mind. Anyway, in general, I would say that this book is easily, and I'm going to say, an 8.5 out of 10. Very good. Very, very, very good book. I got the Hugo for a reason. Yep.